Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learn Plus. My name is Brenda Bailey Hughes. I am so glad that you have joined this conversation today. If you are tuning in on March 17th at around 2 o'clock Eastern Time, then you're live with us, and I would love to hear where you're from. And as the conversation happens, because you've opted in live, please feel free to submit your questions. If our guest Sara and I say anything that resonates with an experience that you've had or some wisdom that you have that you want to share with other listeners, use that chat feature. Take advantage of being live and let us know what's on your mind. The whole point of this conversation started a couple months ago, actually. I facilitate a group of leaders through some development workshops and coaching. And we were doing our monthly check-in. So we're going around the room, each person just saying a word or two about what emotional state they're in right then. So I'd heard a couple of, oh, I'm great, or I'm a little stressed, or feeling kind of tapped out and busy. And then we get to this one woman, I'm going to call her Priya. And Priya said, I'm fine. But it was obviously not fine. And then, so I didn't say anything. And then she goes, no, I'm burnt out. No, she's still shaking her head. Then she goes, I'm not burned out. I'm just carrying too much. And when she said that, it was like the room couldn't catch its breath. Everyone went silent. She hit a nerve. Everybody in there was feeling this, I'm carrying too much. And then the stories started to come out. You know, Priya was talking about how she's in meetings, back to back to back to back meetings all day long, every day, so that her real work, which apparently is not all of these meetings that she has to attend, gets wedged into her personal time, her weekends, her kids' sporting events. We heard about people that felt obligated to manage 3 Slack channels 24/7 all the time. There were people who had recently lost a couple of direct reports without any warning and really without any understanding of what even had happened. I had folks saying, you know, we're here, we're doing the development work, we're learning, we're reading all the good leadership books, we're doing what they say, and it's not enough because we're being asked to do so much. And then one fellow finally put the pin in it for us. He said, it's like the container that we're holding is full and overflowing. Fine, we can manage that. The problem is the container just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody's talking about the container. And when he said that, I thought, oh, wait a minute, there is somebody talking about the container, because my colleague and fellow LinkedIn learning author, Sara Canaday, in her feed for a year plus now, I've been seeing her talk about, write about, teach about this idea that the expectations of leaders today, they just don't seem very realistic, perhaps. So I reached out to Sara. She graciously said she'd come talk to us, share some of her thought work in this space, some solutions that she's trying to build, some tools and support she's trying to provide to those leaders. And I'm so hopeful that folks like you, Marwan from Egypt, and Shelby from Tennessee are going to learn so much from our guest, Sara. So, Sara, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for saying yes and for being here. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me. I am so looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Me too. Maybe we start with, so one of my skeptical notes in me is that sometimes, well, I taught at a university for like 30 years. And it seemed like every first year class, so my first year MBA cohort, they always thought their problems were the most original, horrible, horrific problems anyone had ever experienced. And in reality, it is challenging to be a first year MBA student, but the problems weren't that different. It was just the first time they had experienced them. Hi, Nazife, glad you're here. Hope you get some great tips from Sara today as well. So we had this, you know, so I have this assumption that sometimes leaders, a new cohort of leaders in an industry or an organization, they feel like their problems are bigger than anyone's ever experienced, but maybe it's just the first time they've experienced it. So that's the skeptical part of me. But then there's this part of me that's been paying attention to the last 5 years or so, and it feels like maybe something foundational has shifted. I'm wondering what your thoughts on that, and what you've been in that leadership space for years, working with leaders across a lot of different industries. What are you seeing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I was a leader in corporate for years. And I got to tell you, the skepticism not there with me, because I remember what I was dealing with then, and I compare it to what leaders are dealing with today. There is no comparison,
Okay.
right? And as you started out explaining I loved your story about the container. This gentleman said, the container is just getting bigger and bigger. Well, here's the problem: the container is humans, and we don't have the capacity to get bigger and bigger, right? So there's a false assumption on the part of executives or entrepreneurs or startup individuals that as humans, we can stretch our capacity. No, we are human. We only have 24 hours in a day. We cannot walk on water, right? And absolutely what I'm seeing is that leaders are still expected to build high performing teams,
Of
stay
course.
within their budget, be innovative. But in the last 5 years, right, and we'll start with COVID,
Yeah.
leaders are now asked to protect the mental health of their employees, create a psychologically safe environment. They are supposed to facilitate social unrest conversations.
Mm.
They are supposed to manage the fallout of supply chain issues, right? And that fallout is usually angry customers. And they're supposed to now be trauma informed,
Yes.
help build positions or accommodations for neurodiverse individuals. I mean, again, the list is endless.
Yeah.
Does it mean I don't agree that those things should exist in the workplace for people who need support? No. But do I feel like it's incumbent upon the leader to serve all those roles? I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Right. So the range of the role in the last 5 years has become untenable. It really
Mm.
has.
And so many leaders take every one of those responsibilities so to heart because they care passionately about their people. So they don't want to just say, well, that's not my hat. I don't wear that. You mentioned that you kind of saw a lot of this starting in COVID. I had a manager the other day that said she was promoted into her first managerial role during COVID. So for her first 2 years, she managed completely remote. And she said, because I was not in the hallways observing and learning with my eyes and watching my own manager handle conflict, because she was handling it, but it would be in a Zoom room that I wasn't privy to. She said, how did she say? She said, I felt like I'm taking a huge exam and I've missed half the curriculum.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is so true. We've lost touch with what it means to learn and adapt in real time because we're doing it from our desks, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I see Shelby wrote, it does feel as though tech capacities increase. We feel like we should be able to keep up. Even if we just looked at technology as
Right.
the increasing, yes. I mean, when did it change so fast? When did we have so many tools and feel that obligation to learn them all? Just that one little piece. Um, Uzair, welcome aboard. Rodfebel, thank you for being here from Mexico. It's great to have you. I'm wondering. So that woman, articulated that she felt like I've missed half the curriculum, partly because of when she promoted. But there are so many other expectations, as you're saying, that really were not incumbent on leaders even 10, 15 years ago. What is it that, what do you see these leaders sort of holding on to? And those of you who are here and are leaders or looking to be leaders, please chime in if we missed this. What are their what is it that they're sort of quietly holding? What are those expectations that they have of themselves that are going unspoken, but that they're feeling?
Well, I mean, I think one thing that leaders are holding on to is that they need to have all the answers,
Mm.
right? That despite all of this going on, despite the fact that we're now, in a lot of cases, we're trying to make decisions with half the information we had before, right? Because markets are fuzzy, data is unpredictable, so many shifts are happening so quickly. So it feels like a constant pressure of, I'm supposed to be decisive as a leader. I'm supposed to have the answers, yet all of these shifts keep happening, and I'm going to make the decision, but my confidence is waning.
Yeah.
So it's a very internal thing, right? They can't necessarily show that they're questioning their own decisions, but it's there. It's this low level, constant anxiety. Did I make the right decision? Did I do the right thing?
And that anxiety is higher because I'm asked to make more decisions with less information, with more complexities and nuances, so that decision making itself has become exponentially more difficult.
Absolutely. Decision making, and let's face it, the priorities keep shifting and the goalposts keep moving.
Yeah.
So it's also the simple decision of, what do I prioritize? That's also become, I would say, a really top level concern for many leaders that I work with, that I speak to on a weekly basis if I'm in a workshop or a keynote. It's relentless prioritization that can get in the way.
And that in and of itself has an exhaustion factor to it. Just having to decide what is not going to be a priority. There's a heaviness to that, because
There
that
absolutely is. There is, because if you think about it, it's so easy to write a to-do list, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I can just keep going, right?
I
On a
have
sheet
them
of
all over the
paper,
place. Yes.
right? You got stickies. No, now do the same thing. Give a leader an exercise where you say you have to cut 10 things off your to-do list or take down a few sticky notes, and suddenly they become stymied.
Yeah.
Right? So deciding what not to do, where to set boundaries, is really hard. Nobody really teaches that, right?
Right.
But it's something that, again, because of the expectations, leaders have to get better at. Now, I know there could be some people listening saying, "Oh, right, Sarah, I don't have the agency to stop doing things," right? And I hear this constantly, and I get it. In some cases, you don't, right? You're working through a mandate, you are carrying through a project. But I think if leaders really stop to think about what they do every day, they have more agency than they think they do.
Mm.
That deck isn't, you're not entering a beauty contest. I had a coworker say this in a meeting, and I loved it. Our boss gave us a project, and we had a deck due, and she looked at him straight in the eyes and she said, "Okay, is this a beauty contest, or can I just give them back of the envelope information?"
Yeah.
And I love that she said that, right? And so we have to start asking ourselves, is good enough,
Right.
given everything else? Given the fact that I want to have that one-on-one that I've been putting off, those sorts of things.
Yeah. And let go of the guilt that comes with deciding the bottom 10 things on the list of 50 don't get done. They just don't get done, or they don't get done
Right.
today, or maybe they just don't get done.
Right. And let go of the guilt of not having all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. I see leadership feels heavy when structure is unclear. Yes. Structure within, structure externally. Absolutely. Clarity in roles and decision making doesn't just support leadership, it defines how it's experienced. Thank you for sharing that. Clarity in roles and decision making. And yet we function in an era when the data isn't there to always have clarity about the decision, but if you at least define clarity around who's responsible for this decision, what is an appropriate time to make it? What is an appropriate level of risk for us to assume with this decision, since we're making it without the data that would normally be needed? I think those are some really interesting thoughts. Shelby says learning what not to do has really stunted my business growth. How do we do that? How do we learn what not to do?
Well, and exactly. So, I help leaders do this. And it's really about, it sounds cheesy and corny, but what's the North Star? What are the 3 or 4 primary business objectives that you are mandated to perform, that your team needs to address? How do those translate into not just activities, but outcomes, right?
Yeah.
And then when you're crystal clear on those vital few objectives, then those need to be used as the filter through which everything else gets measured, right?
Yeah.
Does this task, project, request earn the right to be on my calendar given these top objectives and those of my team? So you just have to get fierce, and you have to have a take no prisoners attitude about what gets your time and attention.
Yeah. I'm curious, where on when you're helping leaders think through that, there's this sort of global goal for leaders of supporting, developing, being there for their team. That doesn't show up on any specific project, right? Like that
Right.
doesn't come out. And yet
Right.
it warrants time. It warrants consideration. I want it to be one of my North Stars. How do your leaders that you're coaching, how do they manage that piece without deprioritizing it accidentally because it's not project specific?
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because don't get me wrong. When I'm doing this with leaders, that absolutely becomes one of their North Stars. So just because you have a mandate doesn't mean those are the only 2 or 3 objectives that you can use as your filter. You can absolutely add others. And I am, as you know, a big fan of the others.
Yeah.
And I'm also a big fan of, in order to meet your objectives, there are very human centric things, strategies that leaders should follow in order to achieve the performance. So, for example, when you're communicating objectives, right? In my day, I used to get I always tell this story because it's pretty fascinating. I would attend meetings with my senior VP and his direct reports, right? And he would communicate whatever executive staff wanted to communicate and downstream.
Okay.
He would collect the meeting minutes from my assistant to ensure that I communicated what was asked, that be cascaded, right?
Okay.
Now, here's the fallacy. Cascading an objective or an initiative or a change doesn't mean that your people are engaged and enrolled.
Yeah.
The difference is, how do I bring that objective, initiative, or change to life in a way that has meaning and impact on the people that I lead? Do I bring it to life with a story, an analogy? Do I compare it to something that we've already done? Do I spell out specifically how what we're doing impacts that objective? I mean, there's all kinds. See, those are all human-centric things.
Right. I can tie it to your developmental needs. I can tie it to your personality style, whatever. Yeah.
Well, or I can enroll you in the conversation.
Yes.
I can say, here's the objective. What do you think, team? How do we map what we do? Or what do you know about this initiative and how it impacts what we do, right? You can start there. It's about engaging your team as well.
Right. But if shared the objective, the cascaded objective showed up on your agenda, you got the check mark. And that was all it took, even though that was kind of a meaningless measure.
Back then, that we weren't as I don't think we were as savvy when it came to how to engage and enroll our employees.
But you also didn't have that expectation on you that it was yours to engage, and you told them, and that was enough back in the day. And
That's
now,
right.
when you're talking about all the new expectations, there's another one. It's not enough to just say do it. You got to work through.
Right.
Nazifa has a great analogy about the essence of leadership being about adaptability, even like a dance with the environment and the situation. It's not transactional. Absolutely. Thank you for that. It's resilience, agility, so many things. Marwan's talking about in a dynamic environment, also priority changes, which require a lot of thriving and change. Could be hard to continue focus on the strategic. Yeah, I've got those goals, but they keep shifting and changing. So
Yep.
true. And Nazifa, thank you. Being authentic, vulnerable, resilient, and adapting to the environment while staying true to oneself. Yeah. Let's just keep piling on those things we expect of ourselves. But if this is your true north, then hold on to that one. We've talked about how grandiose perhaps the expectations are of leaders in today's work world. I fear sometimes, as I'm looking at some of the economic uncertainty, that right now at this crossroads of increased expectations and challenge, many organizations are thwarting or cutting back on their leadership resources, or that the leadership resources that they were providing, some of the what we would call the traditional resources, course learning programs, or maybe some sort of productivity tool, I fear they might be falling flat. Are you feeling that too? And this is a condemnation of some of my own work. I am out there doing leadership programs, and I think, I don't know if that helped or if it just piled on here's 10 more things you need to do. Are you sensing that too? And why are they failing? They used to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's happening is those types of support happen in a vacuum, right? You attend a course, you attend a workshop, you go to your company's SharePoint site where they have leadership cheat sheets, you name it, right? But what leaders need right now is not more learning and more content. They need enablement, which means they need help in the flow of work. Not, Monday at 2, attend a course. It's Tuesday at 2, I've been faced with a task, or I have something coming at me and I need in the moment support.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what the difference is. I'm definitely feeling it. And so I think it's really important. And I think a lot of companies are starting to rethink how they support their leaders.
Well, let's talk about that, because I know some of our learners here today are in the HR roles, or in executive training and development, or learning and development roles. What kinds of conversations should they be having internally to start addressing what tools and support really are needed?
Yeah, I think they need to be asking themselves the question, are we building and designing leadership for learning, or are we building and designing leadership for leadership performance? To me, those are two different things.
Yes.
And when I say leadership performance, I don't mean, how can leaders get an A+ or a perfect 360 assessment or a, engagement survey. I mean, literally, how are we designing support in a way that helps leaders get their job done? Whether it's meeting performance metrics or coaching and developing their employees.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the conversation that needs to start happening. And I know it already is in some cases.
I'm glad. And it doesn't take learning out of the equation, because sometimes learning is a tool that's necessary for performance. But I think we've always just dumped everything in that learning bucket. The question when I'm asked into an intake meeting where someone's proposing that we do training for fill in the blank, our high potential employees, our senior vice presidents, or whatever. I kind of ask, if their life depended on it, could they do this skill you're wanting them to do? Could they lead the way that you're asking them to do? Because if their life could depended on it, they could do it. It's not a training issue. They've already learned it. We're not telling them to learn it. We're telling them we need to figure out what obstacles are in the way of them doing it and get rid of those. That's the issue here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, customarily at the end of either a speaking engagement or a workshop, I will ask the question, okay, I've shared a number of strategies with you, a number of tactics. I've given you opening lines to start certain conversations. What makes this difficult for you to adopt here at XYZ company?
Yeah.
And you're not going to be surprised that 85% of the time I hear, we love it. It sounds great. I don't have the time to adopt these strategies, right? So, I think it's that, and let's face it, I also think that we know most leaders are really sharp. They don't lack commitment, right?
Right.
It's just that the systems they're working in sometimes are broken, right? So I am either trying to be the advocate for the leader, right? And I'm trying to tell executives, here's what they're facing, here's what you can do, right? Reduce reporting requirements, look at redundancies, have a data czar that actually goes through all the data so that your leaders, and especially sales leaders, don't tell me, I don't even trust the data in Salesforce. We can't even use it, right? I mean, all of these things that just, leaders have to go above and beyond to try to get their work done. Yeah. So there's that angle. And then there's the angle we're talking about, which is how do I directly help the leaders in these circumstances?
Yeah. Dee had commented when we were talking earlier about, okay, I got to get this change done. I've got to get something implemented. I'm cascading. And she's reminding us that brainstorming with the team is a great way to do it. And Marwin says, can't agree more. We fall into achieving our tasks rather than real coaching and helping our associates. We have to engage the team in their development, not just share exercises. Yeah, I think that's a great piece, is that I would love to mandate that anyone who attends training with me, their managers also need to have a follow-up piece. And some organizations do this of what do you need to do now to make sure they have the space, the time, the tolerance to practice this new skill, make some mistakes with it, and get better at it. So that's a big another support piece. We started this saying, what would we tell HR? What kind of conversation? And that led us to it's not all about learning. It's also about, it's Tuesday, I'm in it, help me. What are, if the leaders that you've been talking to were telling their HR people, here's what I need more of, here's what I'm exhausted by, what would that sound like?
I think the number one thing that leaders are exhausted by, and we touched on this early on, is this daily decision-making, hourly decision-making. Because if you think about what goes into that, right, they either need access to the right data at the right time. It shouldn't take an act of Congress to get access to some data to help make the decisions. Frankly, they're also having to make decisions, as you pointed out, when we don't have a lot of the data, right? Yeah. Because of so many uncertainties. And they're making decisions that, frankly, if something changes between today and next week, it will make their decision absolute, or it will change the trajectory of the decision, right? So again, a lot of, I think it's closely tied with the relentless prioritization, decision-making.
Yeah, decision-making, and relentless prioritization is a form of decision-making. So it just piles one more decision onto my plate and weighs me down. It's obvious you've spent a ton of time thinking about this gap between what leaders are expected to do right now, and how those expectations have changed and grown in the last 5 years or so. And then the kind of support they're actually receiving, like lots of learning bucket support, maybe not quite so much performance bucket. And I know that you've been working to build something new to try to fill that performance bucket. Can you tell us a little bit more about the AI boosted leader, and what were the kinds of problems you were trying to solve for leaders when this idea came to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of goes back to this idea of the response that I got from leaders that said, I really like your strategies. They resonate with me, but they are time consuming, or I'm not quite sure how to proceed. So it was that, coupled with just knowing all the responsibilities and tasks and functions that a leader's is faced with every day. So I built a AI embedded platform that is what I would call a leadership enablement system, right? And so let's take, for example, how do I prioritize? The very first session of 9 leadership tracks is about how to prioritize. And instead of, sitting there with a sheet of paper and, all these other tabs open in your brain and on your computer, the system literally asks you to enter, what are you going to be judged on in the next quarter? And what are those objectives at a high level? And what tasks do you have on your plate? What projects, what initiatives, what standing meetings? And by the way, when you entered this system, you entered your industry and your role.
Okay.
So the system can now personalize for you, when you enter the data, your objectives, what's on your plate, what are your recurring reports and meetings. The system is already designed to then share back with you which of your items are mission critical, which are operationally necessary, but not necessarily mission critical, and which are off track. Now, I do this with 27 different functions of a leader. The same process. It starts with a little bit of what are the best case performance, what do leaders who perform best in this area do? And it's a very quick one pager before you get to executing for yourself, right? So you're sort of learning and executing at the same time. Heavy emphasis on execution, because again, that's where leaders need help, is in the flow of work. I'm also careful to say, when they get their results back, that it's not the answer. It's just a lens through which you can start looking at your work. How does this resonate with me? Is, when I was testing it, I sent it to some people I know. One of them is a CEO here who runs a $20 million nonprofit. And I had her do the exercise with the system. And, she couldn't believe, she thought that what it gave her back was very on target, very much resonated with her. But let's say, we've got this idea that I brought up earlier where, I would love to come up with a story or an analogy for an objective or an initiative that really brings it to life. But I'm a leader, I'm a fixer, I'm analytical. I don't necessarily think of myself as creative. You know how much time that would take me, Sarah? Well, guess what? I have a session in there that lets you put in a new initiative, a new objective. Again, there's no prompting here. You don't have to do any of the prompting.
Okay.
It's been embedded with my leadership first principles, technology second. I've already trained the system to spit back a relevant story, analogy for them to consider using. And if they don't like it, I got to tell you, it will certainly prompt ideas, right? And so they're not always starting from ground zero. They've
Yeah.
had a jump start. They've had a thinking partner. They've had a lens through which they could see something that they didn't see before, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I am really excited about this because I'm seeing such a gap.
Yeah.
We're all hearing about AI and how companies are using it, and everything I see on how leaders are using AI is more either how do I get help with use cases so that I can make certain individual contributor roles more efficient?
Okay.
How do I ensure security?
Hmm.
Um, how do I train people on prompt engineering or how to prompt to better use AI? Again, leaders don't have the time.
Right.
So either the wrong focus or assuming that they want to learn how to prompt for every single thing they do, as opposed to having it all in one system that is
Mhm.
more of an enablement system.
Okay. And so that helps me because I was starting to think, well, when you talked about 9 tracks, I'm like, oh, how is this different than a traditional course that would fit in that learning bucket? How is this different? Can you distinguish that for us?
Absolutely. So these tracks or these functions, or I'm calling them domains, they're all domains that are expected of a leader.
Okay.
So even coaching and developing is in there,
Good.
or project planning, right? How to set the performance agenda for your team using KPIs. They're in there. But these leaders will get the same cadence with every single domain, every single session. And I purposely am calling them sessions and not lessons.
Okay.
But they will get that sort of, I hit them with the reality. Here's what we'd like to do, but here's the reality of what happens. Then I hit them with essential insights. Here's what top leaders know and do in this area. And it's on one page.
Yeah.
That's their learning.
Okay.
And then they execute with their own work.
Yeah.
That's where I tell them step by step, here's what you enter. If you don't have KPIs for your team and you want them, great. Populate this with the objectives you have, or I've carried the objectives from domain one automatically over for them. If
Okay.
they've done it, they don't have to go in order.
Okay.
And the system's going to help you come up with some KPIs that are more outcome driven than necessarily just activities, not
Right.
calls per month, reports done. There's some of that because you need that. But really, what you need is for your team to reach an outcome, right?
Right.
So that's the difference. That's
Okay.
what makes this more of an execution tool and a
Mm,
system that you can rely on. And by the way, for every output, right? Every time they've entered everything that's their own and they get this analysis back to them, they have the option of saving it to their vault. I'm calling it their leadership vault within the system, or saving it to their personal files.
okay. So you gave us a couple of examples. I have 50 things to do. I know I can't do them all. I need help prioritizing. You gave us the example of I need to come up with a witty, sticky anecdote to get this new initiative some traction with my team when I cascade it to them in next week's staff meeting. Um, and I could go into the system and it could help me with that. Can it help me? Like, can I find that I need to do that? It's Tuesday afternoon and I'm in it. I'm in the middle of working on something and I want a little help. Do I need, you said I don't have to do these in order. Would I be able to kind of catapult into the system to find help with whatever I'm working on Tuesday?
Yes, absolutely. Because in the 9 domains, there's a set of 3 titles, right? So there are 3 sessions per domain.
Okay.
If the session's about communicating for impact, the one I'm talking about, coming up with a sticky analogy, That's the title of the second
Okay.
session.
Okay.
How do I bring objectives to life? Or how do I better enroll my team by bringing objectives to life? So it's very clear.
All right.
If they're looking at it, they're looking at a dashboard, they're looking at the taxonomy, if you will, of what I offer, and they can see down to the details. So that, yeah, if today I'm working on, my boss wants some scenario planning, if our budget, if funding from the government gets cut, I've not had much training in scenario planning, but I see it right here.
Yeah.
And this thing's going to tell me how people do it and then walk me through based on my own problem.
Right. It's going to help. It's going to show me in one page what the best
That's right.
practices are to do scenario planning. And then it's going to walk me through doing it so that I'm done. Oh yeah. I love this because that's one of the things I feel so guilty about when people come to meetings or trainings and I feel like they leave with more homework and they're already exhausted. I don't want them to have homework. Instead of adding to their to-do list, you're helping them strike something off the to-do list right there in real time. Oh, I call them the working meetings when we actually leave with less to do than when we got there. And they're unfortunately pretty rare. I see that Joe from East Africa has joined us. Welcome. So glad you're here. Sam from Berlin is here. What a beautifully global group we have on board with us today to learn about leading and so the gap between expectations and the tools that we actually have. Do we have we talked a little bit about leadership guilt around just all of these things I'm expected to do, to be kind of a counselor and an accountability partner and a nurse and a doctor and all the things that now leaders are expected to do. There's some guilt around that. I think there's some guilt sometimes around asking for help too. I had a woman pull me aside recently and she said, Brenda, I've been using Copilot or chat, I don't remember which one it was, but to help me write my agendas for my one-on-one. And I was like, great. But she said it like a secret. She felt guilty that she had outsourced some of this planning work that used to be on her. How are you helping your leaders embrace that it's okay to use these tools and to use the help that people like you are building and that exists now?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because we don't question it when a leader, looks at a financial dashboard to get information, to make a decision or to pursue, a briefing, or we don't think twice about, when somebody picks up the phone and calls a consultant or an attorney to get advice, right? And yet somehow there's a stigma attached to thinking, I better not go to AI because people won't think it's my own work. Well, okay, if it's writing, that's one thing. And I think that's where, everybody's painting this broad brush about, well, it's not your own writing. Okay, fine. But here's the thing. If you've drafted something and you want to communicate it to your project team, but you use AI to say, help me ensure that there are no gaps. I've not left any questions unanswered. Help me with the tone of this. Is there anything off-putting? What am I missing here? What could be the reaction? Then to me, you are doing your job better. Right. You are that much more conscientious of making sure your messages land as you intend them to, and in a way that's going to prevent rework because you're going to have to re-explain yourself or quiet down some, dissension.
You're right.
And, so if you go to AI to, do scenario planning or project planning, again, at the end of the day, and I say this after every AI output analysis on my system, this is just a lens.
Yeah.
Real leaders use their own discernment and judgment. Take this as a jumping off point, make it your own. But I will say that having used AI myself for several years now, it makes me a better critical thinker, right? Especially when I say, play this stakeholder or that stakeholder? What might their concerns be? It's just helping me make sure I plug the holes and I'm considering the perspectives of different people. It's if it's used in the right way.
It's almost as if, like you mentioned, nobody casts a funny eye at you if you use a financial dashboard. No one looks sideways at you if you go to various colleagues and say, let me run something by you. How does this? And it's just, it becomes the colleague, the brainstorming, the second set of ears, the second set of eyes colleague, that we don't actually go ask for help from colleagues because they don't have time and we don't have time. So let AI do this for us. Yeah.
That's right.
Shelby said she realized that AI can say hard truths that maybe your colleague or a friend wouldn't want to point out because it would be rude, but it will tell you, hey,
yes,
you're off track
will.
here.
Yes, it will. Yes. At the end of the year, some of us did the AI analysis, right? Kind of like the Spotify end of the year.
Oh, yes.
I did that with AI, and bottom line, it basically said, Sara, quit iterating, launch. And it had it perfectly. It just knows that I am constantly trying to perfect. A lot of stuff that I do, I go back to and just make sure, and it just called me on it.
Oh, wow. I did not do that analysis. I should have. I didn't even think about it.
It's great.
That's awesome. I love that. We're going to do a lightning round to wrap up here. I'm going to ask 3 quick questions and get your off the cuff fast response. So, ready?
Yes.
Number 1, for leaders that are right here listening live or who tune in later and they're feeling overloaded, they're feeling stretched thin, what's one shift they could make this week?
Oh God, that's so hard. Because I have so many, but I think I would go back to what I said before and really challenge yourself to write a stop doing list. Even if it's 2 things, just pick 2 things in the next month that you're going to stop doing.
Oh, I feel them all taking a deep, scared breath when you say that, but what great advice. Okay. Number 2, what's one assumption leaders need to let go of if they are going to lead more sustainably?
That they can and should do it all. It's just not possible. Again, the capacity that we have is not unlimited. It is definitely limited. And so knowing that, they've got to get clear on what the vital priorities are, the vital few, right? And have everything else filter through that and earn its right on your calendar.
I love this. Earn the right to your calendar through these filters. I love this. Talking about being stretched thin and whatnot, a lady had said to me, if one more person tells me I just need to learn to delegate better, I'm going to scream. Because when the expectations are you do everything all the time, delegating is not, it may be a part of the answer. When you decide what 2 things are you going to get rid of this month, maybe delegating them could be an answer, but sometimes it's just, they're just not going to get done. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but
it is.
I think we all need to swallow. Okay. 3rd, final question. If this conversation resonated with people, and I'm sure that it did, if they're interested in learning more about the AI boosted leader that you're working, this execution of leadership platform that you're building, not just another learning tool, but an execution performance bucket, where should they go? How do they get more info, Sara?
Yeah, well, 2 things. I think, you've been kind enough to include a URL link that they can go and express their interest, and they can be among the first to hear about it when it launches. I am going to go exclusive to this list because I've been including it, which is the next place they can go, on my LinkedIn newsletter, right? Okay. So I've been writing, as you said, for over a year on how leaders can use AI to have more impact at work, on some of the debates of leadership in AI. And all along, I've been including some commentary about work behind the scenes. And so to keep up, just follow me on LinkedIn and follow my newsletter.
Yeah, I see that the link, I know it's hard to retype it, but I see that it is dropped into the chat too, so that you can copy and paste that link to the Leadership Reset into your browsers to go find that. Again, it's Sara Canaday. You can follow her on LinkedIn. I hope all of you are already following me on LinkedIn. We both have courses in the LinkedIn Learning Library. They take time to watch. This tool will help you execute immediately. Sara, thank you so much for being here, for the thought, the very careful thought that you've put into the reality of being a leader right now. I think sometimes just knowing that someone is seeing that reality is good medicine for our stressed leaders.
Yes, I so enjoyed being here with you. Thank you for having me.
Take care, Sara. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. If you know what you're going to let go of in two things, you can put that in the chat. If you have one closing comment or question, put it in the chat. We'll respond to those later. We thank you so much for your time today and for learning with us. Everybody, take care.